Hey, everybody, welcome. I've got with me today enterprise DNA expert Henry Habib, who is our lead authority on all things Power Apps and Power Automate. Um, and what we're talking about today is the second installment of our end of year content countdown, where we're going to be rolling out a two-part course that Henry put together on SharePoint. And it may seem like a bit of an odd choice. It's not something we've done before, but I think it really fits in well with what we're doing in terms of expanding out further into the Power Platform. Henry's going to talk about kind of how SharePoint is a really foundational element of good Power Platform development. And so I wanted, first of all, to just say welcome, Henry. Great having you with us and looking forward to talking about this course with you.
Yeah, definitely glad to be here. I'm really happy that I'm able to share this course with everyone and talk a few, words about SharePoint in general.
Great. And so one of the things I wanted to start with is, for those who've not been heavily engaged with SharePoint, kind of just to get your perspective on kind of what is it? I know, in my previous job, we were really a Google Apps shop. And so we were using Drive and Google Sites. And so just wanted, for those who are not immersed in the SharePoint 365 world, what SharePoint encompasses.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to describe SharePoint as a platform to create internal websites that can hold a whole bunch of different things. They can hold, for example, your organization's data. They can hold attachments, everything from Word files to PowerPoint to anything else. But it's really a platform used to create internal websites that empower teamwork and improve collaboration. So people use SharePoint, and more than 200,000 organizations use SharePoint every single day, but they primarily use it as a way to hold files, as a OneDrive, if you will, right? The reason why I wanted to make this course in particular is because even organizations I've been part of only scratch the surface with what you can do with SharePoint. It's not only a way to hold files, but it's also a way to, for example, create informative websites for your employees. It's also a way to create workflows. So when employees have to do very routine tasks, they go to their SharePoint instead of emailing people. The whole point of SharePoint is to create a platform for your organization to make it more efficient at the end of the day. And how that works is by not only storing common files, but also having your workflows and your routine tasks embedded in that platform.
Great. And so, I think one of the things that we want folks to keep in mind is that this stands alone really nicely as a beginning intro to SharePoint. And then the second course we're releasing at the same time, kind of a double feature this week, is more advanced concepts. But there's a third part of it that's going to be coming out in the beginning of 2022 that Henry's done, that is integrating SharePoint with Power Apps. And so this is really kind of the prerequisite course to that larger objective. Would you say that's a fair characterization, Henry?
Yeah, definitely. So for the double feature, the first part of that, or the first course in general, we'll be talking about SharePoint from the very beginning. So what exactly SharePoint is, how you create a new site, how do you use SharePoint and SharePoint document libraries to store data, how you create new pages, things like that. Then the second of that double feature is where we'll talk about more advanced concepts, things like how you use SharePoint lists, which in my opinion is, if you have anything below 5,000 records and you need to store data, that is one of the best ways to actually store the data, especially if your organization also or already uses 365. So if they use anything like Teams, Office 365, anything like that. And we also go through some more advanced concepts there too, things like permissions, creating subsites, and leveraging the social networking features that SharePoint has to make your employees even more efficient. And then I do like how you did mention a very small amount of my of this next course that will be available, I believe probably in January. That's where we'll mix SharePoint, which again you mentioned is a standalone platform, with other powerful platforms like Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. So that third, or really the third course, will take SharePoint and show you how you integrated with those other Power Platform features to make it even a more robust experience.
Awesome. Awesome. So you mentioned Power BI, and obviously we, a large portion of our content and focus is Power BI. And I know in the past, folks like Matt Allington have talked extensively about how the Power BI SharePoint integration historically has not been great. I think Matt had an article last year entitled something like Power BI and SharePoint terrible together. And I know the Power BI team at Microsoft has been working a lot to improve that integration, and wanted to get your thoughts on kind of where you think that stands at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. So what's nice about all the Power Platform features, Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, is that there exists a SharePoint list connector. What that means is if you have any sort of data within SharePoint, Microsoft has built your very own integration to have that data be used as a base for Power BI or used as a base for Power Automate and Power Apps. Historically, what we'd have to do is to have that integration be done manually. But what Microsoft has done since then is basically made their own connector for it, which makes it a lot easier for you to just have that connection done. In terms of the actual state overall, and why SharePoint is, generally a good platform to run if you're a Power BI user, I would say there's four main reasons. The first is that a lot of the data that exists within companies that want to maybe create a dashboard for example, things like expense reports or employees, there's a SharePoint list that's created for it already. So instead of taking that data, exporting it, and then importing that into Power BI, you can just make a direct connection to SharePoint list. You don't have to have this ETL layer that some people have when they go between SharePoint and Power BI. I think the second reason is Power BI has the same underlying goals as SharePoint and other Power Platform features. It's to really improve team collaboration and efficiency. SharePoint does it through the use of things like team sites, document libraries, and lists. Power BI does it through the use of automating reports and dashboards. And what's nice about it is that you can integrate a lot of the reports and dashboards you've created within Power BI into SharePoint, so that you can have everything in one place. Your employees only need to go to a SharePoint site to access all the routine tasks they need to do, and to also access their Power BI reports. Number three, SharePoint is generally used as the underlying data for Power BI. But it's generally used as the underlying data for Power Apps and Power Automate. So Power BI just fits there naturally. And then finally, both Power BI and SharePoint are part of the same Microsoft Office package. So a lot of the transferable skills that you learn in Power BI, especially related to the logic or coding that you do, will also apply to SharePoint as well. So if you're a Power BI user, you already have a leg up in SharePoint because they're made by the same designer. They're both made by Microsoft.
And that's a great point, and that's really what we've tried to do in all the courses we've been putting out lately in expanding out from Power BI, which is not just make a course about Python or R or SharePoint, but make it from the perspective of the people who are going to be watching this are Power BI users, and kind of how you can leverage that Power BI knowledge to get you further up the learning curve than if you were just taking a garden variety, SharePoint course. So it's kind of geared to people with that knowledge set, and that's what we're trying to do kind of throughout our content offering.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I'm particularly excited for the launch of the third course, where we do talk about that exactly. And we show examples of SharePoint with Power Apps and SharePoint with Power Automate, and show how not only using SharePoint standalone, but mixed with these other Power Platform apps can really, boost that experience.
So I'm wondering if just real briefly, Henry, if you can just talk about in your development work, kind of give some examples of how you've integrated SharePoint into that with Power Apps and Power BI, kind of the larger Power Platform.
Yeah, definitely. Happy to do that. So there was also a webinar on it as well that I released in November, where I used SharePoint and Power Apps for this exact reason. But in the real life setting, and this is something that's been done many times, expense approvals. So especially at small to medium-sized companies, it's a very manual process. A salesperson goes out to another city, goes to a hotel, gets some meals, but then what they have to do is they need to capture all their receipts, and then they need to send an email to HR listing how much they spent, what they spent on, all of that kind of stuff. Then the HR person needs to email the salesperson's manager to make sure that all those expenses are approved. And then after getting so the HR person then has to send out another email to get that approval, which then comes back to the HR person. And then finally goes to a vendor system for, to actually pay out the employee. Now that just in that one process alone for one employee for one instance takes about 3 to 4 emails to do. And unfortunately,
if you're efficient, I mean,
yeah,
it can be a lot more than that.
Exactly. That's if the salesperson doesn't forget to add something. That's if the HR person remembers to send it. And this process takes the most important resource you have is your employee's time, and it takes away your employee's time and attention. So what I've seen SharePoint and Power Apps being used for is in SharePoint, you build a SharePoint list, which holds a lot of the things that you would need for an expense approval. So it holds the expense date, the expense type, the expense name. It also holds a picture. So what's nice about SharePoint lists, it's a database, but you can have very cool, I say cool, but it's sophisticated columns like pictures, attachments. You can also have things like users. So not the user's name, but the user itself, which helps later down the road. So anyways, you have a SharePoint list that has all of those features. You then create a Power App that the salesperson uses to populate that list. So the salesperson doesn't go to SharePoint and select new expense. Instead, they use an app. And the reason why you do that is because you want to craft that experience around the actual user itself. Mm-hmm. The SharePoint list is very standard. It has a form, you put it in Power Apps, so you can craft that experience and say, okay, first, where was this expense dealt, in Canada or the US? If they answer Canada, you might want them to submit another form instead of US, or if it's a different expense type, for example. Or perhaps you can craft the experience where if the amount of the expense is greater than a certain amount, then they go through a different page. So you can craft all of that in Power Apps, whereas SharePoint is a good way to add things, but it's just one experience. And in doing that, finally, you also get into, after they submit their form, for example, then there's a Power Automate script that's run where it looks for form submissions. And whenever a form has been submitted, it automatically finds the employee's manager and sends an approval confirmation to the employee's manager. And if they approve, it then and only then adds that record to the SharePoint list, or it turns it to approved. Otherwise, it sends an email out saying, hey, your manager has not approved it. So HR, also gets emails too, just to make sure that it's flowing correctly, but they don't have to do anything. The salesperson goes in Power Apps, submits the form. The Power Automate script then sends an email to the manager. The manager accepts, the SharePoint list has been added, and then HR can go from there and then send it to the vendor if they want to. So it's all done in the background, and that itself saved so much time because now, especially the salesperson knows exactly what they need. And see, it's one of those things where that's just one routine process that's been automated. But not only do you get the time savings, but you also get so much more organization. And now maybe the CFO who is interested can create a Power BI dashboard from that SharePoint list to see, okay, my salespeople are probably spending a lot more money on hotels. Maybe I should create a partnership with a hotel chain so that cost goes down, right? You have all that data in one place instead of being scattered across several emails.
And so you could even do some process mining where you could say, okay, which groups of approvals are getting held up, and where's the holdup coming?
Yeah, exactly. So we did this for a small to medium, actually, like dental office building, but well, there was more some medical, but the best positive that we heard about it is that salespeople now know where in the chain they are. Because it's really annoying if your manager doesn't approve your expenses. It's really annoying if it's stuck with HR. The employee was like, did not know why they were stuck and where they were stuck.
Right.
But now the employee is able to actually go into the Power Apps and see their outstanding expenses and see what process it's in as well.
Great. Terrific example. So that gets to my next question, which is kind of, by the time people complete these first two excuse me, these first two courses, what's your expectation of what they'll be able to do with SharePoint?
Yeah, definitely. So in the example I mentioned, a SharePoint list, they'll be able to do very complex things with a SharePoint list. They'll be able to create SharePoint lists, add columns to it, add calculated columns, rules, everything you would need to know about SharePoint lists. They would also be able to create very sophisticated team sites and pages. So pages that have, for example, news channels, there's other widgets they can add. They can add reports, graphs, timelines. They can add things like tasks for people. Finally, there's also things like document libraries that they can use as well. So again, SharePoint is mainly used currently as a way to store files, but document libraries allow you to store files in a way where metadata is associated with each file. So it's not, what I don't like people doing is when they have folders and directories and things like that, it's much better to store your files in a list format, but each file has a metadata associated with it. So you're able to, for example, not only associate a person with the file, but also something else like a type. For example, expense approvals, what I've seen that's really annoying is I've seen first you need to go to a specific country, then you go to a specific department, then you go to a specific person, and then that's all their expense approvals. If you do it with a document library, you're able to have all your expenses in one list. And then you can, if you just want to filter to a certain department, you don't need to go to each country. Instead, you just go to a column called department, just filter that department, and it shows you all of that expense approvals for that specific department. So anyways, I could talk about SharePoint forever. But anyways, there's document libraries. I would say those are the big three things that you'll learn. You'll also learn other things like how to design your SharePoint so it's personalized to your business, how to use permissions so you have your employees have access to certain pages and lists, but not access to others, and the social networking features as well. So that's what you learn in the double feature that we're going to release soon.
Awesome. And then the last thing I wanted to close out with is we've talked a little bit about this third course, but I'm wondering if you could give a little bit more detailed preview of what folks can expect in that one.
Yeah, definitely. So that course will have 4 modules. The first module is all about using SharePoint to automate workflows with Power Automate. So the example that I just went through, we'll go through that example in more detail, but we'll also touch on Power Automate a little bit as well and how you can use that to, for example, you can have a process where if you receive an email with a specific subject title and an attachment, it then automatically saves that attachment to your SharePoint folder. So you don't have to do that yourself. So that's the first module we'll go to, how to use SharePoint to automate workflows with Power Automate as well. The next module we'll go through is how to use SharePoint with Power Apps. So how you use apps to create your crafted experience. If you don't want people to if you don't want people to have access to the SharePoint lists and be able to do their thing with it, you can craft your own experience to them so they don't have to maybe go into SharePoint and go to a SharePoint list and go through all of that. They can instead just use your app, which just allows them to do what you want them to do, not anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, we'll go through using SharePoint with other integrations. So for example, using SharePoint with Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. And then finally, we'll learn about how to use something called SharePoint apps. These are third-party apps that have been created that take your SharePoint experience to the next level. So for example, someone's created an app that will automatically take your Excel files and turn them into a SharePoint list. So we show people how to use that. But more importantly, we walk through the process of how you actually use the marketplace and how you download an app and how you actually put it into your SharePoint team sites. Those are the 4 modules we generally cover. Again, the most important thing here is that SharePoint by itself is great, but SharePoint with other Power Platforms is taking it to a whole next level.
Well, this is great, Henry. And I really, really just wanted to say thanks for the time and energy that went into putting this 3-part course together. It really fills a critical gap for us. I think it's going to be something that our members are going to be hugely interested in. Even those who currently use SharePoint, I think there's tremendous opportunity to learn how to leverage it more powerfully, expand the use into other aspects of development and application. So really just, again, want to say thanks for that. And I'm sure we'll be talking more in the near future about the 3rd course and about some other stuff we've got planned for 2022. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Very exciting stuff to come in the future. So I'm really happy to be involved with all of that. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Thank you.